Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
You cannot be missing Canada too much given that it's minus 10 here today. You can't be missing it too
Oh,
much.
oh no, I'm not missing it at all since you've told me. But it's is it so? Is it snowing?
It
My
was it
God.
was snowing there last week, but the snow is gone. Now there's that bitter cold has set in and everyone has their heavy jackets on. So I'm a bit jealous of you, I must say.
Oh, let's change places. Delhi is. I love Delhi. I mean, it's a city I grew up in, but the smog is a problem. And if you've got asthma the way I do, it's sort of like, oh my God, do we really need this? But here we are.
Well, right. Well, it's lovely to have you here. Let's talk a little bit about Funny Boy, telling the story, as I mentioned, of RG coming to terms with his gay identity in Sri Lanka during the 70s and 80s, learning more about his Tamil identity. There's a civil war brewing. When did you first come across the book, and what made you want to adapt it?
Hmm. I came across the book years ago. I think when it first came out, which must be 24 years ago, I think perhaps. I don't know. I read it and I loved it. And I immediately rang up Shyam's agent wanting to option it. And they said, sorry, somebody else has optioned it, some big name and with a big budget, obviously. So I said, okay, okay, that's too bad. And I went on to make my first film in the trilogy called Fire, which was set in fact in Delhi. And then then I bumped into Sham off and on, and I did a small radio play for him for as an excerpt from Funny Boy. Funny Boy had a huge impact on me on many levels, and but time went by and I forgot about it. And then about 3 years ago, Sham came to me, or his agent sent to me a script that Sham had done based on Funny Boy, and I thought that's strange. I didn't know Sham wrote scripts, and Funny Boy. I mean, I thought it'd been optioned and done about I don't know many years ago, and but they said okay, he really wants you to look at it, and if you like it, he'd like you to direct it. So I read the screenplay, and I was profoundly moved for many reasons, but mostly because of Sham himself. I mean, the importance of his life, because Funny Boy is based on his life. It's about RG is Sham and what happened to him, and growing up gay in a society that still considers it a criminal offense, and family, and uh, and also the divisive nature of the world we're living in right now, Tom. I mean, I felt that had incredible resonance now when I read the
Well,
script. Then-
tell me more about that because I wondered whether why 2020 was the right time, or whether it felt like the right time to put this out now as opposed to 25, 26 years ago.
It felt right for me. I mean, it might not feel right for anybody else, but it felt right to me. I mean, there we had Trump down south, and the populist nationalist movement all over the world, where everything was being divided, and there's always the other. So, for what spoke to me this time, as opposed to anything else, was that being the other, quote unquote, starts at home and with one's sexuality and how one is treated, and then you slowly it becomes about culture, it becomes about race, it becomes about color, and then the hatred is it becomes tangible. So for me, it felt like the right time.
So let's take a listen to a clip from the film. This is RG, who is Tamil, being bullied by a Sinhalese student at a new school.
Hey, Shalvaratnam, this is 12C, the Sinhala class. You want 12F for your brother, the Tamil class.
No, Salgado, I want 12C. Ullapo.
How come you're in a Sinhala class?
My parents put me here to assimilate.
Assimilate. We want our separate state. We want our independence. I say, you Tamils have been whining here for the last 15 years. We don't want you here anymore.
That's a clip from Funny Boy. The filmmaker Deepa Mehta is my guest, and it takes on two kind of major topics. So we talked about this. Queer identity, particularly controversial in Sri Lanka, where, as you mentioned, homosexuality is still criminalized, and the Tamil-Sinhalese conflict, extremely violent civil war, which went 26 years, which ended in 2009. You filmed Funny Boy in Sri Lanka. Tell me a little bit about that, about filming it there, what it was like.
It was difficult. I mean, first of all, you just can't pick up your bags and say, I'm going to film in Sri Lanka. You have to submit the script. And in this case, we had to submit the script that Shyam and myself wrote, based on a book that's actually a beloved book in Sri Lanka. So we thought, yeah, this is going to be no problem. Everybody loves Funny Boy in Sri Lanka. And Shyam is a very much admired figure. And so we went there to the National Film Commission. You have to submit your script to them. And if they approve of the script, then only can you film there. So, we had a local production team that I'd worked with in Water and Midnight's Children. And they're really the only game in town and are good people. And we went there and they said, no. After keeping us waiting there for 3 months, they said, sorry, you can't film you can't film it. And there was no answer. I mean, it wasn't, it was like from being passed from one person to the other, one bureaucrat to the other. Oh, sorry, she's not at home or he's not at home. We don't know, but it's not going to happen. But I must say that both Shyam and myself really wanted it to happen in Sri Lanka. It got to a point where somebody said, why didn't you film it in Malaysia? Which, the terrain is a lot like Sri Lanka. And then they found out, no, you can't film there because homosexuality is illegal there as well. So let's go to the Maldives and let's check that out. And of course, it just didn't feel right. Or let's go to South India. They speak, we could go film it in Tamil Nadu. And it just became insane. And it felt that if it couldn't be authentic, then what was the point of doing it? And this is Shyam's story. It's his story about growing up, and it's his story about being caught. Shyam doesn't speak a word of Tamil. His father's Tamil, but his mother is Sinhalese, and they grew up speaking English at home. So that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to build a bridge I don't want to sound soppy, but it's true. He wanted to build a bridge about understanding and a dialogue between ethnicities, because the hatred wasn't getting anybody anywhere. So we said, okay, let's try. And then we tried again, and we were there for 1 year. We couldn't. And finally, at the end of 1 year, we got, there was a change of something happening, I don't know, within the department. And a young woman became the head of the National Commission. And she looked at it and she said, oh, I love it. I remember reading it in university. And the Prime Minister, Ranil Wickremesinghe, was a friend of Shyam's at that point. He's ousted since, which is too bad because he was great. And he said he really supports it. But it took 1 year of going back and forth. And if there's one thing, it's just hanging around waiting.
Well,
really.
Homosexuality is, as you mentioned, still criminalized in Sri Lanka, which is a legacy of colonial British law. Could you see, even though you were making this film about a story that was written 24, 25, 26 years ago, could you still see some of RG's story reflected in Sri Lanka today while you were filming, in terms of how homosexuality is perceived there now?
Absolutely. I mean, though they have been, they, like, for example, the young man who plays RG is queer and has come out, and it's and he's done this is his first film. He's done theater, which is gay theater, and everybody is sort of aware that he's gay, but nobody really talks about it. In a public space. So I think it's at the cusp. It's going to change very soon. I hope so. Well, maybe not with this government, but I hope so. And there's a quiet around it. There's that bubble of, that you can talk within the bubble, but you can't pierce it because something bad might happen.
Well,
so definitely You can feel it.
You can still feel it to this day. I mean, we have to talk about some of the criticisms of the film. There were calls to boycott the film even before it was released. One thing that critics, particularly from the Tamil community, took issue with was after seeing the trailer, the vast majority of the lead characters are not Tamil. So what do you say to those criticisms of your casting?
I just think it gets to a point where you say, I understand it in a strange way, because we get the world that we've come in. So many of us don't get an opportunity to play ourselves, or they forget about get an opportunity. There isn't enough work written about us that we can play it. I mean, you talk to most colored actors, and at least from Southeast Asia, and they end up by playing Uber drivers, and that's it. So when something big comes up, or not big, it's hardly big, but something substantial of a beloved book, you want to be there, and both Shyam and myself really wanted that, and we spent a lot of time. I mean, since we had a lot of time on our hands, seeing if we could find people who were Tamil, who were from Colombo and Sri Lanka or Jaffna, who could also act. I mean, that's really important as well. And we found one who was amazing. And maybe it's the luck of this film. I don't know. And we were all ready to go with Suthan, and he's from here, from Toronto and Scarborough, in fact, and great actor, wonderful actor. And he couldn't. His father had a bypass surgery and he couldn't make it. And then we were postponed for another 6 months. So I called him up immediately and said, Suthan, are you ready? Can you come now? How's your dad feeling? And he said, I just got married yesterday. So it just didn't gel. We tried. We really did. And but finally you have to, I don't know, it was either not to make the movie because we couldn't be true to that self, which is important, but also, why make a film where we couldn't get the right actor?
Did that cross your mind to not continue making the film if you couldn't find someone who was queer and Tamil?
Yes, it did. And I looked for, then I went to Colombo, and through Shyam met a whole network of, we did casting calls, etc., and network of actors. And then we found Brandon. And at that point, it was getting to be slightly hopeless, but Brandon was like magic. I mean, because he was what RG is supposed to be, is shy, vulnerable, but so strong and queer. I mean, that was like a shock. Amazing actor who fit the role, who was right for the role, had the vulnerability, but also had the courage to come out. So then I said, let's do it.
But it seems like you can understand why it would matter to Tamil folks that though he is gay and the character is gay, that he's not Tamil. It sounds like you understand that.
Of course, I understand it, but I also understand what Shyam was also trying to do was that Brandon is not from Timbuktu. I mean, he's Sri Lankan. He's a burgher. I mean, that's a small minority in Sri Lanka as well. So when, yes, it would have been great to find a queer Tamil actor who would fit the role. But I think if we are trying to build bridges within the country, which was important for both Shyam and me, I don't think we deserve to be slammed because we really did try.
I mean, it's not just casting either. We should talk about some of the language in the film. Some people, like the Tamil Canadian journalist Rad Simon Pillai, said that the Tamil dialogue in the film was butchered as a result of non-Tamils in the lead roles. How did you feel when you saw that?
I didn't have to see it. I mean, I was I don't know, maybe a bit trusting. I like Rad. I've known him. I don't know him very well, but I know him. It was very important for me that the first people to see it in Canada was the Tamil diaspora. So I invited Radhin and his wife Laura for a very small private screening, because there was still, it was like just only 8 people and social distance and masks and stuff. But I thought I really would like. I called him as a friend and I said I really would like to know what you think. This is your story. And he saw it, and he was there with few other friends and people, and he said how beautiful it was. But he said, Deepa, the Tamil really has problems. And it took me out of the film. So I said, thanks so much, Rad, because, even though I knew it, because obviously that, you know what you're doing. You have to dub certain things, and we had guide tracks, and the Indian characters could not speak Tamil. And I said, but, I'm so glad that you reinforce something that I know, that the minute the COVID allows us, we have the studio booked in Colombo. And
so you redubbed the dialogue to be more accurate Tamil, right?
We were always going to do that.
Oh, were you?
Even before Rad came to see it, but he just confirmed something that we always knew. So we had it. In fact, in Colombo, we had a studio booked, and we had the actors booked, and we were going to go there and do it. But guess what? COVID happened. And it was impossible at that point. So we had to have the actors in their closets, without any coaches, with cell phones, doing guide tracks. That's what people don't understand, that those were supposed to be guide tracks. And maybe in retrospect, I shouldn't have shown it to anybody at that point when the Tamil hadn't been corrected. But I did think that Radhyan would give his honest opinion, and he did. And what he writes is up to him.
And obviously, Deepa, I'm no expert in this, but I know from just researching to get ready for this interview that language is a major source of discrimination, of violence in the Tamil-Sinhalese conflict. So on one hand, it's an element of the film that you've worked on, but can you understand why audiences would find that not just inaccurate, but also quite painful?
Absolutely. I absolutely understand that. Not only do I understand it, I did my damnedest to fix it, and we did. And of course, I have done, all my films have been in Hindi, most of them have been in Hindi. And in fact, a film that I did called Water was Lisa, who's a wonderful actress, Lisa Ray, worked on Water and learned Hindi for it, but her Hindi wasn't great. And finally, I said, Lisa, I love you, but we have to redub all your dialogue, because even as Indians, they will feel offended if they hear bad Hindi. So I totally get it. But I'm just saying, give me time. Let me fix it before you run your judgments.
And as you mentioned, you're from India, but you're not Tamil. Do you still think you're the right person to have told this story? Have you had doubts?
I don't know. You should ask Shyam that. I don't know.
I'm just looking for some reflection from you. You know what I mean?
I don't know. Am I the right person? Is Doyle the right person to do Slumdog Millionaire? You tell me. Is Denzel Washington the wrong person to do Mandela? I don't know anymore. It's a very difficult world that we live in, and yes, representation does matter now more than ever. So am I the right person? I don't know. The novel was around for 26 years. I wish some Tamil had picked it up. The question is, why didn't they?
I don't know if the opportunities were afforded to them in the same way they would be afforded to someone with the level of stature that you have.
You think not? I know some really fine Tamil filmmakers sitting in Toronto right now. Lennon Sivan, who is just brilliant, did a film called 1999 that I just loved, and has done another film that's coming out soon. So there's some really fine filmmakers.
The next question, of course, is, so why not let them do the film? But the answer seems to be because the author wanted you to do it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think it's a question for Shyam. It's his book. It's his story. He's half Tamil. He's not fully Tamil. So when he gets, it's something you should ask him how he feels about the purity issue. I don't know.
But does all of this just point to a larger problem with representation in film, that when there are so few movies that represent any given minority group, there's a ton of pressure on whoever chooses to tell that story? Did you ever feel that way?
I didn't till now. I
Yeah.
didn't. I mean, it's, and in retrospect, I feel it. I'm not an idiot. I get it. I totally get it. And I totally tried to, I'm not being apologetic or a wimp because I actually, whether you understand it or not, I actually like this film because I think the film is more, the language is important. It would have been great to get a queer Tamil actor to play RG, but we got a queer Sri Lankan to play him. The next, and who's great, who's a good actor. But I think what's important is that, and I don't want to speak out of line here, but I really think what's important also is that this is a very tragic story about what happened to the Tamils, the pogrom, the genocide, and 26 years of a civil war, where the suffering was huge and immense, and very few people know about it. I think that story should be told too. But hey, you want to boycott it? Go ahead. You want to talk about language? Go ahead.
Well, yeah,
know that I know. Know that I know, and know that I have empathy. But if that's what you want to do, be my guest.
But and you say that, but I hope you don't. You're not being glib here. You sound like you really are taking this to heart.
Oh, I am not being glib. I'm not a glib person. I mean, I'm just a filmmaker who was very proud of this film, and now I like the film still. I like it, but some things, which is what was wanted. It just makes you feel why. I understand why actually, but it's unnecessary. The ugliness is getting to a point where when I think of my kid, and I don't know, I'm just getting emotional for being stupid. I'm sorry.
I hear you, and we can move on. I'm speaking with the Oscar-nominated Canadian filmmaker Deepa Mehta, whose new film Funny Boy is out on Netflix now. Deepa is also known for her films like Midnight's Children and her Elements trilogy Fire, Earth, and Water. A pretty amazing list of credits. When we were looking through them, Deepa, one thing that seems to tie them all together is telling the story of oppression or marginalization, whether that's stories of domestic violence or sexual assault or political conflict or queer identity. Why ultimately do you think you're attracted to these sort of stories? Where does that come from?
What do you mean by these sorts of stories?
There are people who make stories about hot air balloons. There are people who make stories about mowing the lawn.
I wish I had. I don't know. I think that because of being an immigrant in Canada, I don't know, to Canada. And I know what it's like to feel the loss in a way of one's homeland. I feel also what it's like to be the other. And there's something about Canada which I really liked, and I continue to, which is that it gives us, unlike the States, it gives us an ability to continue to be ourselves. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I like it, and that's what really intrigues me as a filmmaker is because all my films are, as you were naming them, seem to be about loss and wanting to belong.
I mean, just take Water, for example, about the treatment of Hindu widows. It was seen by some to be anti-Hindu, which resulted in bomb threats, your film sets being destroyed, effigies of you being burned. Deepa, what does a death threat feel like?
It feels like what's happening to me now. That's what it feels like.
How do you mean?
That's what it feels like.
I don't know what you mean.
Like, I don't know. You just now are you being glib? I mean, what does it feel like? It feels like you want to stop being a victim immediately because you're not one, and to feel one is destabilizing. It feels that hopefully this too shall pass. That's what it is.
I mean, it just feels scary. I mean, I've just never had to. I've been lucky enough in my life to have never had to experience anything like that before. Is the reason I ask.
Don't make films on Hindu widows.
That's a good way to avoid it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, sure. I mean, don't make films about things that you care for. I mean, or you want to explore more because why do I make films? I mean, I make films about subjects that I'm curious about. Like I said, about loss and patriarchy, and somewhat about wanting to really fit in. And how do you hold on to your heritage, and yet how do you grow into your new world? I mean, there's this wonderful a quote by Baldwin. I hope I don't butcher it, but I don't know. It says something like, maybe one of the reasons people hold on to hatred is that if they let it go, the pain will begin. And I think that unless the pain begins, we can't heal. And we have to let go of the hatred. I'm not just talking about the hatred towards Hindu widows or domestic violence or what happened with the Tamils, which is really sad and deplorable in Sri Lanka. But I'm talking about the world. I'm talking about the Proud Boys down south. It's like, when are we going to stop?
But on the other side of this, I mean, look what else they've done. In Fire in 1996 was about two women who fell in love in Delhi. It was so taboo in India at the time. There were protests, there were vandalism at theaters. It was a huge box office success, and it spurred a counter protest where women carried signs that said, "We are Indian and we are gay." So what was it like to hear about these women who came out onto the streets to support and in some ways protect your work?
That felt good. It felt that maybe, they say that, that maybe truth is immutable. I don't know. That's what it felt like. That it will, maybe you suffer, then it'll come out one day, if you're alive to see it come out. But that it was right. It was right, because the whole point of doing films is that let's have a conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's heal. Let go of the hatred. Let the pain bring us onto the same table.
Well, maybe this is a good place to end it, because I'll leave the last word to you. I mean, Funny Boy is about to come out on Netflix. A lot of people are about to see it. What conversations do you want people to have? What do you want people to take away from it?
The importance of, for me, it's what Shyam and myself would like. Let me speak for myself. What would I like to take? It's that I think it's important to be seen. And I think it's really important that the world sees what the Tamils went through.
Deepa Mehta, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom.